Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. She wants to know if any listeners have been to Komodo Island, Leanne Hughes.
Hi everyone and welcome to the show. I'm your host Leanne Hughes and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. The show last week was a solo mini-sode where I shared some of my lessons learned over in Hong Kong recently. Now that was a wonderful learning opportunity and I hope you got some value from that episode and that you tried to avoid the mistakes that I made. Now today we are on to episode 80. Can you believe it? Episode 80. It's just amazing. So I thought I'd invite a special guest back. You may remember her from episode 39 where we talk about discovering your facilitator zone of genius. Her name is Sarah McVanel. Now, we met for the first time, virtually on that episode, and I just got so much value from her about the business side of facilitation. So that when I left my corporate job in February, it took me about 6 weeks of umming and ahhing before I made the call and the decision to get Sarah on as my very own business coach. And the reason I'm doing this episode is that on the Flipchart community on Facebook, we've had people write in and ask more about how to build their facilitation business, how to market themselves, and how to build a pipeline of work with clients. And as a solopreneur, I have those very same questions too. And I'm lucky that I get to walk through those questions in detail with Sarah every fortnight. So I thought I'd offer you some insight into what Sarah and I talk about in our coaching calls and how this relates to helping grow your very own facilitation business. Oh, and by the way, another shout out to Aminata Ndoy, also in Canada, who virtually introduced me to Sarah. Aminata, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for that introduction. What you'll notice from this call is Sarah's contagious energy and enthusiasm. And I also give her kudos as a coach towards the end of the conversation, but I also want to say up front the value that I get from her calls and her ability to take what is in my head and help make it more real and add some fun flavor and personality to it. It's a real talent of hers. And I guess when you're on your own in business, it is so wonderful having a sounding board and someone on the journey with you that can encourage you and just back you. So I really appreciate that from Sarah. Sarah McVanel is a recognition expert, author, and experienced and dynamic speaker and coach. She helps leaders leverage the exponential power of recognition to retain top talent and sustain healthy bottom lines. Sarah helps organizations by curating healthy workplace cultures through her FROG methodology, which stands for Forever Recognize Others' Greatness, as well as through speaking, training, coaching, and mentoring others. Her philosophy is that once we rediscover the understanding of our own greatness, we can use it to recognize that greatness all around us and improve ourselves, our workplace, and the organization's bottom line. Sarah also helps intrapreneurs to shake off the golden handcuffs like she did and launch successful 6 to 7 figure businesses they love. Check out her most recent book. It's called The Flip Side of Failing, which shines a light on failure, and it provides readers with analysis and strategies to free themselves from that feeling of not being good enough. Remember, if you want to continue the conversation when the podcast is over, you can join our community of over 200 facilitators from all over the world on the free Facebook group called The Flipchart. Like I said, I definitely take a look at all the questions that are on there and I'll aim to answer them either through solo episodes or through finding out experts and having a conversation with them on the pod. So whatever you're thinking or feeling or have questions about, join the group and put it out there. And look, the community itself provides some wonderful responses as well. You can view a link to the group and other resources mentioned in this episode in the show notes for this one at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 80. Now, onto the show. I would like to welcome back to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Sarah McVanel. Sarah, it's so great to have you back on the show.
Leanne, I love your podcast. So it's an honor to be here. And I love just what you're all about and seeing your brand continue to grow and evolve. So it's pretty cool to be back here when I was one of your first guests.
This is episode 80, but you were on episode 39. So it's pretty much, half, will double the time.
Yes. Okay. Not one of your first, but earlier days, but it's, oh my gosh, you have such incredible guests on this show and you're a great interviewer. So yeah, thank you for having me back.
Well, just on that topic of, you talked about, you've seen my growth and everything and you enjoy the show, but you've been a bit of a contributor to that. So what some of our listeners may not know is that following our call back in episode 39, and if you do listen to that, I think I do say it in the episode, when I was talking to Sarah back then, I was working in a corporate full-time job, but I'd plans of leaving, and it felt like a coaching call. So I didn't know what I should focus on. I didn't know how to really take this. And that episode was all about finding your facilitator zone of genius. So if you're in a similar position, I recommend listening to that. But after that call, I was like, wow, I really noticed how great you are at pulling that greatness out of people. So I've got Sarah now as my business coach. And we've been working on a lot of things since I left corporate in February. And I just wanted to sort of share, I've got a lot of questions in my Facebook group about growing a facilitator business. And I thought we could talk about a few different aspects. But very quickly, if our listeners haven't heard that episode, can you just give them a bit of, I guess, a Cliff Note summary of your career? I know that's a very tough question, but yeah, how you got your start, what you're doing now.
I actually made the leap like you from a really good corporate position, having done organizational development and training almost my whole career. I worked exclusively in the not-for-profit sector and always thought that this business idea would be good once I had no mortgage and my kids had left home and, all those rules that we give ourselves. And then my son had a mental health crisis. And I realized that if I did not work less and I was more available, then, we may lose him. And then all of a sudden, all of the worries about can I actually make a business work went away because now I have a reason to make sure it works. So I left that role. It'll be 5 years in December. And just open up the doors. The first thing I did was I just went out to people that I used to work with and that I knew. I think I sent some emails, probably some LinkedIn messages, picked up the phone and just said to people that I felt liked and trust me, hey, I'm going to be working for myself now. You want to do anything? For the first year, it was just doing whatever people knew me as that, in that capacity, a lot of facilitation, a lot of training, even some strategic planning and proposal writing. And I just realized that was the fastest way to burn out and make no money is if I just did a whole bunch of things. So I hired my own business coach and I hired a speaking coach and I got really clear that my core area of expertise is recognition. I built an entire business around that. So now I feel very grateful that I'm able to pay myself what I used to make in my senior leadership role that I left. And I have the freedom and the flexibility that I had been so craving that I didn't have in my corporate life. And my kids are doing great now. And it's not a fairy tale. It's not a happily ever after. And then she started a business and everything was magical. It's a lot of work too. Really is where I want to spend my time and what I want to spend my days doing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that as soon as you left corporate, you were making all these phone calls and reaching out to people. And I think that's what I admire about you the most is how consistent you are, particularly on your Facebook, the amount of videos that you do, your consistency with emails. You are always showing up. I see Sarah around. That's sort of why I reached out as well, because I was like, how do you do this? Particularly because you've got kids and all this other stuff going on. I really admire the way that you do all that. How do you do it all? How are you so consistent?
I have a service first mentality, and I just believe that if I show up to try to help folks, that when they are helped, there will be a way to work together. It could be coaching like what you and I do together. It could be a referral to bring me into an organization to do training or speaking on my area of expertise recognition. That's how often bureaus get recommended to me, is by people who've had a good experience with me. So that's how the speaking business is built pretty quickly. So part of it is just I really, really want to serve people. And then you get good results from it, which motivates you to keep doing it. And I also am an extrovert, and I kind of feel like social media is the extrovert's playground because I can't always spend all of my days talking actually in a room to people. There's only so much coffee and coffee houses one can experience. However, you can have very meaningful, short conversations and connections through social media all the time. So consistency for me has never been an issue because I enjoy it. It's a personal value of mine. And I just have been seeing consistently the business benefits of it. And for those of the listeners on the line who are listening, who haven't left their corporate world, that is one of the best ways you can, quote, start your business is by putting articles on LinkedIn, by starting a Facebook group, by being active in a serving sort of capacity as opposed to a buy this from me capacity in a closed Facebook group. If you love what Leanne does, which who doesn't, your flip chart, I've called it right, the correct name, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in it. I just, just to show up in that group and to serve, and people will notice that and contribute in community. Because that's really, I think, how we make our profession better. That's how we make other people's lives easier. And when you help people, they generally remember that.
Yeah. And I think you always say to me, serve, serve, serve. So I think I've got that. I've definitely, it's like written on my forehead. I've like, okay, just got to remember to continue to serve and add value wherever I can. And I think it's true I'm definitely having a lot of fun on LinkedIn at the moment. So doing some videos and content and just meeting a ton of people. And every time I think about a piece of content to put on to LinkedIn, it's about how is this helping the other person? It's not about me. It's about shifting that focus and say, what's some advice or what's a story I heard that can help someone else? And it is about the long game. There's so many times where you put out content, you might not get many likes or comments, but you might see someone that you haven't seen in a while and like, oh, I love what you're doing on LinkedIn and this video. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that you saw that video. So,
right. And the more you're sharing, the more all of those social media platforms say, hey, this person's serving a lot, because that is going to work to you in your advantage in the algorithm. No matter what social media site you're on, the more you're on it, they reward people who are consistent. So remember that it actually, you can't just sort of show up once a week and expect that the social media platforms can be like, oh, we've been waiting for her all this time. Thank goodness she's back. It's kind of like, oh, really, you? What have we done for you lately? Kind of thing. So they actually reinforce and reward that. The other thing, to your point, is it doesn't take everybody liking your content for it to be effective. It takes the right people who need and want what you have available. You look how successful you've been in your business in the time, it's not been very long that you've been in business for yourself, and your calendar is pretty darn full. Mm. So it's not about having to have so much engagement that everybody on your list is liking and acknowledging it. It's that your content is so relevant and your brand is so consistently communicated that people begin to associate your expertise and that's serving a need that they have. The other piece for people who are really still not convinced that social media can help you in your business, I mean, besides the fact that it's free, and I'm Scottish by background, so I must say I love the things that are free, but
that was good.
It is a tool available to you that you have to pay nothing for. I mean, how much marketing stuff do you have access to for that? And you're potentially going to benefit, to your point, around the long game, long term. Mm-hmm. So as you're putting out content now, maybe you want to run Facebook ads or Instagram ads in a year. You're going to create an audience because Facebook can say, hey, these sorts of people like your stuff. Would you like a lookalike audience? Why don't we go and find it? Now you have to pay to play with things like that, but you got to put in the time now in order to be able to have that data later. Similarly, people can be consuming your content now and not necessarily be reacting to it. I can't believe how many people, it actually freaks my husband out because he's not big into social media and he's a teacher. So he's a little on the private side, but people will know what's going on in my day before he even knows what's going on, because he'll come home from work and say, yeah, Bonnie was saying that you were having fun rearranging your calendar and that you've got a new tool. So that would be a pretty lame thing to talk about. But, he'll come home and he'll know what's happening in my day. And he'll say, how did she know that? And I'll say, well, because she saw what is going on she's following me on social media.
Mm-hmm. That just cracked me up, actually. It's happened to me before as well. And particularly people, when you haven't seen them in a while, I'm like, oh yeah, and then you did this and I see that you've been here and you're like, oh.
Yes.
Yeah, I shared that.
And that's what makes you really interesting. People want to work with people who are interesting. So there's lots of folks who say, oh, it's so boring. People share what's on their lunch. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not getting the posts of people sharing pictures of their lunch, but I don't see that sort of stuff. I see people going on work trips and family trips and kids' graduations. And, I called up one of my clients. I spoke at an international conference a few months ago, and I would love to be able to speak for them again. And I just said, hey, congratulations. You are officially the parent of a 3-year-old. How does it feel? You've passed the terrible twos. We had something to start the conversation. And I genuinely care about his child. So it's not just I went and lurked on Facebook to see what could I talk about in a sales call. We have built a relationship on Facebook. And interestingly, what he said back to me was, something that I was thinking about recently was how so many of the people that you're connected to on Facebook, I am. And I don't think we've ever had a speaker at our conference that has built relationships with so many of our members. So I probably won't be bringing you back this year because we don't do that year after year, but you are definitely coming back sometime soon. So it's this genuine connection that you can have with people for very little time, some effort for sure, and it costs nothing.
Yeah. And the best thing about it for me is one thing that I don't love doing, and what I was kind of scared about when leaving corporate was, right, if I have my own gig, I'm going to have to make all these sales calls and I'm going to have to put myself out there and ask the question. I have not had to do that yet. There will probably be a time where I will have to do it, but really it's been just a case of giving out value, being consistent, and then, like you said, through the long game, people will reach out and ask for quotes. For me, it's more preferable than having to cold call people that I don't have a relationship with, and I've never been good at doing that. So, definitely probably something I need to overcome in future. But for right now, it's really nice that social media is working in our favors because it's about just delivering value, being consistent, and for some reason, people will eventually, when the timing is right for them, be in contact. You spoke about how I've recently left corporate and the calendar is full, and yes, it is. But there's always something, and I think this plays on every entrepreneur's mind, is my pipeline. So I could be booked out for a year, but I'd still be worried about what about the next 12 months? And there's always this constant looking ahead and forecasting. And we had a question in the flip chart from one of the listeners saying, hey, look, I've started my own facilitation business. How do you get repeat business, or how do you continue to build your pipeline? What are your thoughts on that? I know this is a big question.
Love this question. Love it. And it totally fits with what I talk about as an area of expertise, recognition. So value your folks. I do things like, in fact, this is what I was doing just before our podcast. I have this system called send out cards, where I send out cards to anyone in the world. I pay $97 US a month, and then I can send an unlimited number of cards to anybody I want. So I had a couple of amazing conversations with bureaus this week. So I just sent them cards. If I have a picture with them, then I will upload that selfie, or I can download a picture from their website. I can put it on there, or just they've got all these really great templates. So that's one thing, is I would rather send out a card talking about specifically what I so appreciate about the relationship, as opposed to my new marketing material or something kitschy that they don't really care about. So my brand is Frog, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness. I could send them a box of stuffed frogs, but what are they going to do with it unless they have a bunch of grandkids? So that's one of the ways I do it. And if it's a good client, I will go to Facebook. I will find out when their birthday is, and maybe if there's an anniversary, such as when we started working together. So the day we signed our bureau contract, put that in as an anniversary, and the system will just cue me to send a card. So that's something fairly new that I've started to do.
That is such an awesome idea.
Oh, we can include a link in the show notes.
We'll definitely include a link to that. Oh, how not? But the extra effort that you've put in as well to look at birth dates and anniversaries, geez, you are in the right business, recognition. That's for sure. You make that effort. Yeah.
Well, and who doesn't want to receive something in the mail? Because mostly we just get emails, and what do we think about that? So if we're just constantly sending emails to our clients, then we start to be a bit of a pain. Whereas if it's something that's nice, there's very few people who associate a card with a pain in the neck. Even if you got a paper cut, you'd still probably be okay with it, as long as the card was cute. So that's one thing that I do. Whenever I have a new product or a book, I try to make sure that my best clients, they get a copy of it. People who've referred me to people, I will send a gift certificate to something that they would enjoy. I had a really big contract that I won as a recommendation from one of my speaking colleagues, a very healthy engagement. And I sent her to a day at the spa because, my gosh, it was 1/5 of my year. So it was a very, very lucrative contract. She would never spend the money on a day at the spa, a very, very nice spa in Toronto. But you can imagine how grateful she was to receive that. And she has since recommended me to other people. And I didn't do it so that she would keep recommending me. I did it because there's this woman working so hard, and yet she still took the time out of her day to recommend me and to follow up with a few emails with that client. She worked hard to get me business and gets absolutely nothing in return other than, maybe feeling altruistic and making sure his client is served by somebody who's qualified. So doing those things, when my virtual assistant came back from holidays, I sent her dinner this first night that she was back because I knew that she'd have a lot to catch up on, even though we're in the process of transitioning and I've taken on a full-time assistant now. So she was only going to be with me for a few more weeks. I'm still grateful that she is working hard to train my new assistant. I know I can call her anytime I need it. She's been instrumental in building my business with me up to this point. So it's almost like, what would be the right thing to do? What would be a way that I could show that I appreciate you, that I'm paying attention, and that I value you, and keep valuing the relationship even when you don't have to. So if you only phone a client up, how you were saying about the whole idea of thinking about cold calls.
Yes.
Part of why people don't like that is they feel icky that people are going to think, what do you want? So if you've been showing up in a way in their life, whether it be through making recommendations and answering their emails or they're answering their questions on Facebook, or sending them quality content on LinkedIn, or sending them cards, or here's a copy of a book that I've sometimes sent copies of other people's books to clients that I really love. Serve, just like we were talking about for serve first, and your business will benefit from it. It's not magic. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't necessarily fill your pipeline so that, your kids can start going to Harvard just because, you're sending out thank you cards. However, it certainly is way, way more enjoyable, in my opinion. And it sounds like in yours too, Leanne,
yes,
than having to every Monday morning from 9:00 until 11:30, pick up the phone and make cold call dials. I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that. That would be so draining. I'd rather find a full-time job than do that.
Yes, a job. Oh my God, not a job.
Completely, I agree with that philosophy. And it all comes down to relationships. So every single gig that I have had since leaving corporate has been a result of some relationship, some prior relationship, or a referral. And I love one of my other favorite podcasts is the Jordan Harbinger Show. And his favorite sort of comment is dig the well before you get thirsty.
Yes.
So I just love that statement. And you've just given us a couple of really practical ways that we can dig the well for our business. Now, a couple of times in our coaching calls, I just wish, I know we're recording this, but I wonder if I should release it to the group, because I had a question for you in our last coaching call, and you made me do this exercise, and it was so powerful, and it really gave me confidence. So the question I had for you was, I want to price this workshop. I'm not too sure about pricing or what I'm worth. Do you want to sort of share, I don't know if you even remember, but what you said back to me when you're like, okay, this is what you need to do if you want to figure out what your value is? I thought it was so powerful.
Well, first of all, you're so generous in sharing these exercises in our coaching time together with your listeners. See, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about around serving. And most people, especially in our field where we work as serving other people, so this is our intellectual property, our knowledge, our expertise, we often undervalue it. And the first sale is to ourselves. That is not my expression, that's somebody else's. So we have to believe that we are worth whatever comes out of our mouth. I believe this is the exercise I assigned to you, is that go and write down every single thing you have done to get you to this point. Every course you have taken, your degrees, your diplomas, the weekend networking sessions that you have done, the new models that you have created, the sessions that you have presented, the range of facilitation topics that you can facilitate on and train on. Just absolutely everything that makes you unique. And it doesn't have to be just professional. It can be the fact that you lived in 18 countries before you're 8 years old, and the fact that you had a pet kangaroo. I hope nobody had a pet kangaroo, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
What makes you different and unique and interesting? Because those interesting factors also play into why you, as opposed to somebody else, and why now, as opposed to, I could just probably wait for this. So once you have that list, you can begin to add up how much you invested, both of actual cost as well as opportunity costs. So when I did my master's, I forgo 2 years. Granted, I was a psychology grad, so it wasn't a big paycheck, but still 2 years of a paycheck before I got my first job. And I didn't start at a significantly higher rate than I would have when I did get a job after my master's. So that actually counts as part of the income, or part of the equation of how much value you have to offer your clients. And just because there are paid positions on my list of all of my experience, we'll write down, what was your employer willing to pay you for trading your time and your brain and your attention for supporting their organization? What you're going to notice really quickly is, wow, I have a lot to offer. It's highly monetizable. And what I say to any potential entrepreneur, wannapreneur is sometimes the word that people use, but it's not.
I have never heard that one, wannapreneur.
It's kind of almost rude, so it's clever. So I don't like to use it, but those of us who have ambitions to do it, and there's holding us back, whether it be fear of failure, it could be not having the support at home, it could be your job is just, it's paying you so well, it could be a huge mortgage. I have lots of ideas about all that stuff if you want to get into it, Leanne, as you know. But really, the bottom line is, what have people been willing to pay you up to this point? And what is the added value that people have been getting when they employed you as even bonus value? Because sure, they probably pay you for your experience and your expertise, but the fact that you speak 3 languages, and the fact that you know how to count, like do math up to 7 figures in your head, and all of these wonderful, wacky, wild, fabulous things that are very different and unique, that's not only interesting material for creating your personal brand and some really cool bio stuff, but also I think you're going to be able to stand taller in your fees. And I'm just curious for you, Leanne, when you did that, what did you find during the process and what did you find afterwards?
Well, the biggest sort of revelation for me was I was comparing myself to other facilitators that I knew. And because I'd come from an internal role, I knew the rate that they were charging. So I was doing a direct comparison. And when I was thinking at without doing the exercise, I was thinking, wow, look at the experience they've got, look at the clients they've worked with. I can't compete with that. But then I started writing it down thinking, wow, look, I've done how many podcast episodes. Where have I traveled recently? I've spoken at this conference, International Gallup Conference, looking at the accreditation I've had, look at the types of experience, not the years, so the types of experience. So being the only female in Canada running supervisor training for all males, stuff like that it's unique. Plus,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of video on Instagram. I started doing a 30-day Instagram video challenge. I moved it on to LinkedIn. So I've been editing videos, and doing video work is something that I've self-taught, but I think, how can I bring this video stuff into workshops and helping clients? So it could be filming a 5-minute introduction video, helping them embed using video and webinars, and using the technology, interviewing their senior leaders for podcast episodes. So all the stuff that I could add value to that was in me, but I didn't really extrapolate it out. And then I realized I've got to stop comparing myself to these other people, because they've had their own way of doing things and their own journey, but there's all these other things that I can contribute that are a bit different and are unique experiences. And plus the hours of professional development. I listen to 10 to 12 podcasts a week on leadership. So if you sort of extrapolate that over 2 years, that's a lot of professional development, the books I read, all of it. So this, but when you see it written down and it's on a Google sheet, I like that the fact that you can look at the data and go, oh, I actually am worth this. And they can take it or leave it. If they leave it, that's good intel for me. But the client that I used it for most recently agreed to it. And I would never have charged that if it wasn't for you getting me to dig in and do that exercise.
It's putting you in a position of, I deserve to make this, as opposed to what I think a lot of folks get worried about, in addition to, of course, to the what will people think if other people are charging this. And that's a very real thing, the comparison, because that's what we do in employed work, is we are put on a grid, and where are you at on the grid compared to other positions? And, so that's it. We go into entrepreneurship kind of thinking with our corporate mind.
Yes.
We have to think very differently. And so what's really fascinating, and I absolutely love what I'm hearing, and I really hope people have picked up on this, what Leanne did was she figured out, this is what I uniquely am worth to my client, and that if my clients decided that that is not what they want or need, this is what I'm worth. Bingo. As soon as you can walk away, you are in the best bargaining position. And secondly, you figured out all kinds of additional products, services, resources that you could offer as additional value to the client, whether you choose to offer that initially or long-term as a value add because you're just so amazing to work with. That's just it's an added selling feature. Or it could end up being a paid product, an extra revenue stream, because having offerings at multiple levels, your free stuff, like what we talked about with social media and videos, those things that you're doing, which are awesome. What's it really an expensive product? What's a slightly more expensive product, but quite manageable? And then what's your premium product or offering? That exercise, and I didn't even realize that that was some cool stuff that you had discovered during that process, is going to position you beautifully in thinking, what is another offering that I already have based on the experience you have and probably even content that you've already developed?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it is about writing things down, but you just become way more clearer, and it's obvious as well. So I really wanted to share that with our listeners because it's such a powerful process.
I love that you just demonstrated through generating that list how you are able to start shifting. And this is a really important concept I hope folks understand. We can't just always trade our time for money without having to settle for either working and getting exhausted, working every hour under the sun, and or reaching an income cap. And that's the challenge with working in a JOB, is there's only so much we can get paid without climbing the ladder. And as I know, and as I think you experienced, the farther you climb up the ladder and you get that nosebleed, you're going to be working even more hours, and it costs you in some way. Now, not every organization is perhaps like that. A lot of organizations sadly expect more as they pay you more. And even so, it's going to be a cap. I mean, in Canada, it's probably the same with most countries of the folks who are listening to this call. Women get paid less. So I also know that I have a glass ceiling that I was going to keep banging up against, as well as, of course, opportunities. What I've realized through my business is when I invest in myself and in the time in creating new products and services, both the things that people can pay for my time to do the work with them, but also in the more of the passive revenue, such as having virtual product offerings. Some people coach with me one-on-one like you, and other people do my virtual program. And it's offered in two different ways so that it offers two different touch points, two different price points. Sometimes it's scaling from one into the next thing. It's also, though, allowing me to serve more people by there being other options available. So I'm really excited, Leanne. I can see in a future coaching conversation, we're going to be talking about how to turn some of those ideas into some passive revenue opportunities. That's, I think, the next frontier for you, my friend.
I think it is. And I've always been a fan of Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income podcast. And yeah, definitely want to do that. But we talked about income streams and expertise as well. And as part of that process of communicating your value, you spoke about what type of models have you created? I know that you talk about one thing which is serve, serve, serve. And I think another thing that I know you for is niching down. So picking a niche and focusing and really getting strong in what your expertise is and communicating that. So that's something that we've been working on through our calls. And I think what you said, it was funny when you left corporate, you were just saying yes to everything, and you found out very quickly that you just became burnt out. And I think, I don't know if it was our second or third coaching call, but I said to you, oh my gosh, every gig I accept, it's something new, and I'm just developing, and it's getting really tiring having to develop all this work. And that's when we started talking about, well, what is a niche of yours? And so I went away, and I think we spent a couple of calls just brainstorming what are some things that I enjoy that I really want to stand strong for, and ended up creating this acronym called DICE.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's emerging of what we got down to, I think, the other week, and this is something I'm working on in the next sort of couple of months of communicating and really getting it all together, was, for me, DICE, which stands for Driving Influential Contagious Experiences. It's an acronym, but as well, if you think of a dice and throwing a dice, getting in the game, getting involved, it's really about, for me, like a way of life and a way of doing things.
And it's a fun facilitation tool, and it's inexpensive to purchase a dice for everybody in the room because you could buy them in bulk, and you can have a workbook with different dice exercises where somebody buys the workbook and they get up to 6 dice if that's what you need for up to 6 dice to do the different exercises. I mean, like there's so many cool things that you can build off of this one acronym. And frankly, who doesn't want a contagious influential experience? So many of the words that you're using are actually sales-oriented words. So there are things that it's hard to argue that you'd want an experience that you'd want something contagious, that you'd want to be influential, that you'd want to drive something forward. So all the words that you selected, and for the listeners who may not be as aware of Leanne's journey with creating this model, she worked very hard at finding the right words. She is one with DICE. I think she knows the word in the English language for DICE, to find the right words. So you have done such an incredible job of being able to find a way of capturing not only the concept in a really sticky, catchy, fun way, you also have at the same time identified who needs it most. And I don't know if you remember that part of our conversation. It was so juicy. You realize that you really want to work with the facilitators, yes, but also to help middle managers.
Yes.
Who desperately need something. They're expected to create these contagious experiences while they're burnt out. They're expected to, build an employee engagement when, of course, they have a limited budget. So you're meeting such an unmet need. And that's really something that, for those folks who are trying to figure out what their niche is, who do you want to serve? Who do you love to work with? Who do you want to serve? What are their gaps? What are their pain points? So that if you can serve and solve that issue for them, especially if it can be easy, less expensive, faster, better, then you can find a way of capturing that in a really sticky way like Leanne has done. Now, every time one of your clients works with you with the DICE model, every time they see a pair of dice, they're going to think of you. And dice is something that's in our popular culture, in just about every culture around the world. So you want to be associated. My brand is Frog. I have people email me pictures of frog signs. Frog. I'm going to forever recognize that there's greatness because a frog just jumped in front of me. So create something that's in the culture that it's really easy for people, even if they can't remember exactly what every single word in the acronym means, they can remember the essence of what it's about. It's about how you make people feel. That's how people remember you, how you made them feel. It's the same thing with a sticky brand like this. How do people feel by working with the DICE formula? They don't have to even remember what DICE stands for anymore, but they'll remember that it was Leanne Hughes who came up with it.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned people sending you frogs. I can imagine getting photos from people at casinos all around the world, the Bellagio and great.
I was gambling my house away.
Yeah. But what was interesting, you mentioned I spent a lot of time thinking of the words. Yes, that's true. But also with the I was getting a bit stuck. And then you talk about what areas, what topics I liked. And I recently did a lunch and learn session about influence. And it's like, I love the topic of influence. I just kept going on about it. And then you said to me, why can't the I be influential? And it was like, oh my gosh, that's so obvious. And I think this is let's talk about coaching for a second. This is where coaching, I think, has really helped me, because when I left corporate, what I discovered the most was I didn't have anyone in my corner. When I'm working in corporate, you're on like the open floor, you've got your colleagues next to you, you've got your manager, you're constantly bouncing ideas off people. And that's how I like to work. I like to get ideas by talking it through with others. That's, I guess, a sign of being an extrovert.
Yes.
Talking and
fellow extrovert, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just didn't have that person. So that's why I very quickly sought you out. And then that conversation was like just the perfect coach. Because a lot of people are like, hey, Leanne, like you know a lot about business and why do you have a coach? And I was like, well, here's the example. And the example I give them is this. We're talking about this DICE acronym. I was really stuck on the word I, and you saw it. You saw it in me. I talked about it. But when you're stuck in your own head, you don't see those things. And that is the value of having a coach.
And the other thing too, just to circle back to the conversation around get paid what you're worth, is that as soon as you increased your fee to what you deserve, and I'm sure we will do a fee increase discussion, you will have another one of those discussions because we're working together for at least a year. So I'm sure we'll chat about it again because your calendar will fill up and that's when it's probably there's some capacity to increase my fee again. Mm-hmm. When you make more money than you would be able to make without perhaps somebody in your corner, you've now paid for the coaching. Because if you made, let's say, $1,000 a day and now your rate is $3,000, well, every day that you work, you bring in $2,000 more dollars than you would have brought in before. Well, that just pays for coaching within a few sessions. And that is how I've always looked at coaches. Even though I'm a professional certified coach and I do coach with other people, I always have coaches. I have a sales coach right now, a marketing coach, and a life coach.
Wow. Yeah.
We all need coaches. And my husband was even just saying to me yesterday, we just had our 21st wedding anniversary, and he was saying, so Sarah, do you think you're going to hire another business coach soon? And I said, well, maybe I will. I'm not sure. I should probably finish up with one of the other 3 coaches I'm working with if so. But the point is you fill your need where it exists. And as my business has evolved, and I'm sure the same will be for you, Leanne, and other people listening, you find people to help you in the areas that you haven't quite rounded out or that you need some support, or you need to master, you need somebody in your corner. And then as soon as you fill that gap, the marketing coach I'm working with is specifically around virtual programs. And I have built it. And so now all the investment that I put into hiring him has paid for itself by having that stream of income and doing a better job in building out not just that program and the platform, also the marketing to be able to bring people in to understand that this is something that's available and to see if this is something that they want. Because they never want people in my programs if it's not the right thing for them. It's just making money is not more important than serving people. So hiring your coaches at different points in your business allows you to fill a void that you've just discovered. And it is okay to have lots of voids to fill. Even people who are trained in business, of which almost all the people that I know have not been trained in business. So we don't come into it as salespeople, as marketing professionals, as lean efficiency experts. And so, of course, we need help in those things. Every time I create a new keynote, I hire a speaking coach or I hire somebody specifically on story crafting. I think we need to know, and this may be a little different than how people have experienced the corporate world, it's actually a sign of strength, of confidence, that you know that you, deserve to invest in yourself, as opposed to somebody else doing the investing in you, which usually is what we expect in the corporate world. So you invest in yourself, and then when you've invested in yourself, you have to live bigger in your business because you've now just made that investment. And you've mentally told yourself, my business can grow and I am worth that investment, or I'm going to make this investment in me so that I do leave my job because it's now cutting into my vacation fund and I want to go on vacation in 6 months from now. Whatever you need to do to get yourself in action and to fill a gap that you maybe didn't realize that you had. And good for you that now you know that you need somebody in your corner to help with that.
Yeah. And I also go back to like Roger Federer has a coach. It's like the best player in the world has a coach. Like Eric Schmidt, CEO and chairman of Google, had a coach. I'm reading the book at the moment. The guy coached Steve Jobs and everyone. So, I mean, who am I? Leanne Hughes, like 3 months out of corporate. I feel like it's just accelerated the things that I would have done. Because that's the thing. You have ideas of what you want to do, but being self-directed, it's nice to have that accountability. Every fortnight you ask some really great questions in sort of pre-work, like, how am I feeling right now? So we all talk about how reflection is important when it comes to facilitation and embedding what we learned, but we rarely as entrepreneurs get the time to reflect because we're trying to do things and create more business. But even that first question that I answer before every time we catch up about how am I feeling right now, I really appreciate just the opportunity to do that because it also informs what I should be doing and it realigns what I need to be doing rather than just, paper shuffling and doing things that don't really matter. So,
it gives you an opportunity to shift the script if you need to. So if you think, I've been just doing paper shuffling, to me, it's, I have been researching for my next book, or I have been connecting through these links. I've been able to send out all of these additional resources on LinkedIn, which have been getting good engagement. So it's also a way of being able to really be honest with yourself about spending your time and valuing. Because again, coming from corporate, we think we are paid to produce. So in the entrepreneurship world, we get frustrated. And I even, to this day, I still struggle with this. So it's not like it just goes away just because we are self-aware about it. I'm so used to and have always been used to being reinforced with the A in school, or B, with the getting a better job, getting assigned to the better project, getting offered a senior position, whatever, is through what your output is. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things that we produce and we don't necessarily get paid for it. We don't necessarily have a successful product. My most recent book that I released, Flip Side of Failing, ironically was written after I failed to write the book I wanted to write twice. So I don't get paid or compensated or have any medal for not writing 2 books that didn't work. What I can feel good about is that I did persist, and that, I have a book that I'm really proud of now at the end of it. But let me tell you, when I had been spending all that time and energy not successfully writing those first 2 versions, sorry about that, that was not cool. That was not a fun experience. So I think we need to, whatever you need to do, whether it is your spouse, whether it is a coach, whether it's a best friend, somebody, a trusted advisor who's another entrepreneur, or a combination of those things, because really I have all those things. We need people on our team to remind us what we are achieving and how far we've come. Like you were saying, who am I, man? I've been in business for 3 months. Oh my gosh, Leanne Hughes, you're Leanne Hughes. You have done so much in such a short period of time. And look at how many listeners you have. Look at the quality of your podcast. You have 80 episodes, girl. 80. And they are seriously good stuff. Your podcast is one of the few I listen to regularly. So I think that we need to have people who, you've got folks in your life who can probably be pretty concerned about how your business is doing, because it directly affects paying the mortgage, or if you have time for them. And so that's where family can be challenging. They have their own opinions about things. They probably have their own ideas about if you should have a JOB or not. Our best friends may not understand unless they're also entrepreneurs. So definitely surround yourself with people who get it. Surround yourself with people who can remind you about how far you've come. And if you want to make huge strides in your business, that's where I really think the coach is worth the investment, because that's really what you've been doing. You have just been like leaps and bounds achieving, Leanne, truly.
Thank you. And actually, that's another point I wanted to raise, is just like the encouragement. And you're the best at giving encouragement. And because it's a lonely world, like you said, if your family and friends aren't solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and they're just working, Monday to Friday, it's like you're just battling this on your own. But it's just so nice to have someone particularly very positive in your corner, just to keep you on track and remind you where you've come from. So if anyone ever asks me why I have a coach, I'll probably just share this episode with them and they can sort of... Sarah, thank you so much for what a wonderful conversation. We've covered so many different areas around the business of facilitation. And I just want to publicly thank you so much for even just the first sort of 3 or 4 months of working with you. It's been, I think listeners can understand from listening to this conversation the value that you bring and your contagious energy that just comes across the other side of the world on the audio. So if people want to connect with you, find out more, where can we send them?
We'll definitely put it in the show notes, but if folks want to hop over to my website, Greatness Magnified, love to see you over there. The virtual program that we were talking about is called 8 Weeks to Freedom, and there is a link. One of the tabs underneath coaching is there, and that's the entrepreneurship program. And anyone if they want to be part of community as well, we have a closed Facebook group called Greatness Biz, and a flash briefing by that same name. So it's available on Podbean and Amazon Alexa. So folks who maybe are still gearing up and want tips every day, it's a 1-minute tip every day on entrepreneurship. So a couple of different resources, and I'll make sure that the links are all available to you to put in the show notes too, Leanne.
Awesome. That's great.
Look, can I share one last tip for folks? And I think it sort of encapsulates so much of what we've been talking about. Really, if we kind of had to bottom line one key message for everyone, it's know what your core area of expertise is so that you are credible. And this was something that it was actually when I started speaking, professional speaking, so many people would tell me, what do you speak on? And you'd have to have an answer to that or else, and it'd have to be short because speakers get really bored if they don't get to start talking soon. So I had to start saying, I'm a recognition expert, as opposed to, I really like to help organizations become the best version of themselves. They'll be like, what does that mean? So pick an area of expertise, demonstrate your credibility through that. I mean, you are a rock star facilitator, and people will begin to see and connect your brand as the DICE brand. And anytime somebody needs a contagious experience where they influence and that they're driving the right systems, they are going to think of you. And that's really probably a great exercise. If anyone wants to, if they want to take something away from this episode and work on it, maybe they're already listing their things of, what they're worth and why and how much they've invested in it. But here's the other option is think about if you had to do one thing for the rest of your life, and you could only ever read books and LinkedIn articles and go to conferences on this one thing, what would it be? What would you probably never get tired of? And when I say probably, is it's your business. You completely can change it if you want. And I just know that I don't think I will ever get bored of talking about recognition or recognizing people, because I've been doing it since I could talk, and I can't stand it when people don't value me. And you are just a master facilitator, and you are contagious in who you are. And so, you have picked a beautiful brand that represents who you are. So that's something I hope that your listeners find really helpful, is to really think through, what is my core area of expertise? Because that allows people to remember you, refer you, and you can better get paid what you're worth, because you begin to become one of few as opposed to one of many. And that's probably why, in a nutshell, why some of your colleagues who probably deserve to get paid a lot more, and you are comparing yourself to them, why they don't charge more, because they haven't defined their area of expertise and they don't realize just how invaluable they are in that core niche.
That's a beautiful statement to end on. And I think it's funny when you said, when someone asks you what you do, I'm still fluffing around with that. So I love that. I'm a recognition expert. That's just that sentence. If you're listening, and I think that's probably the key, is like, how would you answer that question? What type of expert are you? Just fill in that blank.
I love it. So good. So bottom.
What expert? Yeah. Sarah, you're the best. I always love chatting to you, and thanks for your contagious energy. Can't wait to release this one.
Thank you. And good luck, everyone.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.